Hello, and welcome back to the ministry. And in conclusion to what I was talking about, the woman that was on the phone with me that day, she was looking at me like she thought I had 5 heads and I was speaking a foreign language. So, when these types of things happen, it's a spiritual block. And because the enemy is cunning, he will try to put a spiritual block between what it is that you are supposed to receive. Update though, I did get the block removed. That's all I'm going to say. And you have to pray. Why am I saying this? I wouldn't be so adamant about this if it wasn't for the fact that a lot of people like to talk about, oh, I want my Boaz. Oh, I want my Boaz. Or Esther, for such a time as this. And what other marriages? Those are the top 2 that we always hear about. Because everybody wants their Boaz, right? Let me tell you something about Boaz. Boaz was 80 years old. When Boaz married Ruth, scholars believe that after he slept with Ruth that night, he died of a heart attack. It's only one person I ever heard say that she believed that he had 3 children. I was like, I don't recall hearing that. And when it comes down to Esther, Xerxes' reign was 17 years, okay? He came in, he was married to Vashti for 3 years. He was seeking a new wife for 4 years. He married Esther and was married to her for another 5 years before she was called on the fast to save his life, which leaves him 5 years before the end of his reign, which he died. So they didn't have that much time together. Their marriage was maybe about 10 years. Okay. Why do I bring this up? 1, the devil don't play clean. He plays very dirty. Why do you think that people that have been standing for kingdom marriage, especially for people of high influence that the Lord has shown them that is their spouse, one of the reasons why I say don't play when it comes down to kingdom marriage, when you're praying for these men, the type of warfare that comes against you ain't pretty and is not kind. I can tell you all kinds of things, not just stuff that's happened to me. I've heard the stories from others because of the way that they have had to stand. If the Lord's making it a short frame of time that he's bringing you back together with this particular person, because some of people are getting reconciliation to people, and if he's bringing you back, the amount of work that he had to do within you caused them to go through everything from nausea, illness for weeks on end, all kinds of stuff. Every time that they were either covering or within proximity of their spouse that people had to go through. And then just the level of having to pray, the type of spiritual darts that people will send at you, all kinds of things, because they don't want you with this person. Type of spiritual attack. let alone, and this is long before you even get to the person. If you're with a person that has high recognition, meaning when they see them, if they allow you to come into a public arena with them, do you realize, good thing that looks can't kill, because some people gonna be looking at you with death eyes. I learned a long time ago, when I'm surrounded with a person that has witchcraft within them, there's certain very specific things that happen when someone's throwing a spiritual dart at you in your body. I've had certain types of physical attacks. I was like, what the heck is this? Witchcraft. I can go into full detail if I wanted to. Why do I say that? There are people that just really don't want to see y'all together. But there's also spirits associated with them don't want to see y'all together. Why do I say this? Because of the fact that there are spirits attached to people's bloodlines, and you need to be praying to break bloodline curses, generational curses at their foundation. If you haven't heard me say this before, hear me say it now. You need to read The Power of a Praying Wife and couple that book up with Breaking Demonic Covenants and Curses from James A. Solomon, because you're going to need to do that for your God ordained spouse. If you new fresh to this, you're going to need that, because you're going to have to deal with that. Because, yeah, why am I saying this? There was a case, I was in a group with a bunch of Christian women, and the women came together, and we were waiting on certain breakthroughs for that season. So, what ended up happening is that with this thing happening, I was in the group, and one of the women has just so happens to tell a story in the group. And with that story that was told, she tells that her daughter got married. Now that's a moment you'd be like, oh, that's beautiful. That's great. Her daughter got married. Within 1 week of her daughter getting married, her husband was struck by a vehicle. Somebody else told the story that there was another scenario where the person did not die. They were on their honeymoon. The person was walking along the side of the road. I don't know whether they became delirious or what happened, but something weird occurred within that moment, and they almost got killed on a honeymoon. But because somebody was nearby and saw what was happening, they got them out the way. The devil ain't playing. These marriages are targets. So you better have all your paperwork in order, because the devil leaves you for a season. These spirits that have come to try to leave you for a season. If you're not breaking covenants and curses, you don't want that thing to come back. You need to be praying against premature death against your spouse. I was watching the news the other day, and they were talking about there all of a sudden an uprise of geese, birds, and all kinds of things flying into engines of planes. If you have a partner that you know flies, you know you about to fly. You about to go out here and start flying. They're talking about planes have been going down, hit air turbulence, all kinds of stuff. Matthew McConaughey, we know, is a celebrity that's a Christian. He was on the plane when one of them nearly went down, but everybody got out of that plane situation safely. More than likely because he was the Christian that was on the plane. And more than likely he got a praying wife. You need to be praying for these men. And not just to get them. You need to be covering everything. So when I tell you, you can sit there and say, I'm a spiritually married this person and have sex with him and move in with him and all this kind of stuff. If you want to. But you need paperwork. Because God forbid anything happen to them. Early in your marriage, late in your marriage. You need to make sure everything is taken care of and covered. Why am I saying this? There is a pattern that I've learned about the devil and his minions and the way that they work. I learned this early on, but I didn't understand the pattern until now. When God has a person covering you, my mother covered me for the first 17 years of my life. If I knew what I know now before she passed, I would have been praying heavily for that woman to survive. But I didn't know. What you don't know, my people perish for the lack of knowledge. And that means even more now that I have this understanding that sometimes your lack of knowledge can cause somebody close to you, the enemy is trying to take out, to perish. Because they want to take that person out to remove the covering off of you. When my mother passed, my covering was removed. I had not given my life to God yet. So immediately warfare hit. Okay? Whatever demonic covenants and everything that was attached to me from my birth mother came back. Blockades, embargoes, delays, all of that returned to me the second that my adoptive mother died and that covering was removed. Whenever I was in a situation that I was heavily covered and I needed to go to another location, 9 times out of 10, the location that you had peace in, you may end up running into a level of heavy warfare upon immediate transition out of that place. If you cross over into the new location, there may be immediate warfare to try to keep you from settling into the next location, okay? Why am I saying this? Because if you're called to God-ordained kingdom marriage and God forbid, either you die, the covering you have over them is going to impact them severely, and the covering that they had over you is going to impact you severely if all things are not fully covered. I listened to Prophetess Jolynn Whitaker and Tiffany Montgomery. Jolynn Whitaker always says that you need to have all of your ducks in order. Get your paperwork in order. Get your finances in order. Get these things in order. If you do not have order, it leaves room for the enemy to slip in and use any form of a technicality to block you from receiving. Especially those of y'all that are called to people that have influence. Sometimes you are the only person that is covering your spouse in the way that you're covering your spouse. Something happened to them, the people and the vultures that were in position to take them out, they're going to come back to try to make sure you don't get anything that belonged to them. Best believe it. Best believe it. You will fight. Why am I saying this? Miss Jolene, Dr. Jolene, just went through the process of getting a new property. She fought Christians on trying to get this property. They had to pray. They had to go through all kinds of stuff just to get the property that belonged to her. When she was moving from Atlanta back to New York, 3 of her properties were attempted to be burnt down. Okay? These types of attacks, they knew. Okay? Why am I saying this? Cover your husband, because God forbid anything happen to them. 2, the types of spiritual attacks that will come upon you if there isn't secure covering over you. I'm talking all your documents in order, all your ducks in order, because legality is the number one thing the enemy uses against you. And if y'all want to sit up there and use sex as your legal binding document, ain't no proof of that unless you got a kid. And even if you got a kid, these types of people in these industries will sit up there and try to say, is the child actually theirs? Can we do blood tests? And they will fight you on blood tests. I remember years ago, there was a case where the woman was dealing with an agency in relation to her children. They didn't want to release custody of her children to her unless she had a psych evaluation. They wanted to perform the psych evaluation, and they wanted their doctors to do it. She separated herself from them and went all the way back to a place that she had went to before, because she had to have something done previously that the time frame was just right, that she could get the evaluation she had done previously from the place that she knew and bring that document back. They just needed a document of an evaluation, because she knew if she went to their doctors, they were not going to give her kids back. Why am I saying this? They will bring up every damn loophole that they can bring up to prevent you from getting any asset from this person. And if they can come against your children, they can come against you because of documentation. Because these people will put up as much red tape as possible. Documents, paperwork, say this about you, all of this kind of stuff. You do not know how long your partner is going to survive. I always pray the 120-year prayer over my God-ordained spouse. That the word promises 120 years. Because I want at least 50 years of marriage. And the only reason that I would not see 50 years, I pray, is because the Lord takes us all up out of here before then. Because you need to cover your spouse. Because you don't want to end up in confusion. A lot of women marry men, and the men are the breadwinner. And then when their husband dies, they are left out in the cold, destitute, barely can protect themselves, because there was no assets, no savings, no nothing. There was a case, I remember I happened to go to a meeting years ago in a library where they were talking about what happens when a person has to be in the hospital and the types of things that happen if the person needs long-term care, to be put in hospice or any type of thing. And they talked about how because of these medical records, and it's so funny, I was looking at something last night. No, it was Sunday night. And they were talking about this. Because of the cost of keeping a person in the hospital, think about this. Hospitals do not want to keep people in their hospital unless they are paying, and the insurance will only cover for a certain period of time. So people end up having to pay out of pocket. People end up blah, 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 unless you got coverage like that. And what was ending up happening, you were seeing families where there was a literal case where there was a man and a woman, the husband was dying, and what they wanted to do was legally liquidate all of his assets to the wife and then to have her divorce him so she can keep the assets. Because if he died and she was still married to him, they were going to come after her for all of his money. All of the money, all of the hospital bills, all of the other things, for the debt, for the amount of time that he had been in the hospital. They were going to ream her. And because they weren't financially sound like that, same thing occurred where it was a scenario where they wanted to take a person's property. It was the children of like this parent who had owned the property for years. And because of that, they needed some type of documentation to prove that they were the legal rightful owners of the property, or the property was going to be taken for something or other. And it was a big deal between the children and all of this, because I don't know whether they couldn't find the documents, but it was a weird thing that had occurred. And they were talking about it was a specific form that needed to be processed in order to make sure that they were able to keep the property. They had to go to a lawyer, and it was almost like they had to come out of it and be put back on it or something like that. It was weird. But you see how complicated these things can get? You don't need this type of complication if your God-ordained spouse passes and you're holding the bag. You need all of your ducks in a row, because the devil don't play. Do we not? If you want, you want to use the word as an example for a reason why. Oh, well, these people, they didn't have no documents, no rings, no this, that, and the other. So you shouldn't have to do that. You should just wait and do your ceremony later. No, because let's look at the legality. Because remember how hard legality was in those times. Let's look at Nehemiah in the book of Ezra. Nehemiah wanted to build a wall. They said, no, we don't want you to build the wall. They stopped them from building the wall. They put up an edict stating that you can't build this wall for 2 or 3 different terms of whoever was in charge. It's like our presidencies. They would not allow this wall to be built because legalities, forms, documents, what have you, you can't build this wall. It wasn't until they could produce a specific document that was an edict that was already placed in the legal forms that showed that due to the delay of this thing coming to pass, the people that held it up now have to build it, meaning they had to assist in it being built. Legality. But that couldn't happen until what? A document was produced. Okay, let's go forth to the tax collector. The tax collector, even Jesus said, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, because they were talking about not being able to pay that tax. And he said he went and got the told the guy to get the coin out of the fish's mouth. Let's go to the woman whose husband passed away, had worked for particular people for a certain period of time, and he had no assets. She had her 2 sons, and they were coming to take her 2 sons as collateral because the father had debt. She had to go to Elijah and ask, what in the world can I do? Because they're about to take my sons. Legalities. Is there any more doctrine or documented paperwork that needed to be done? Formal decrees. You can take the formal decrees that were done in the book of Exodus, that Pharaoh were writing formal decrees. You can take, everybody loves Esther, you can take the formal doctrinated decrees that even what was it? Not Malachi, because wasn't Malachi the uncle. I'm talking about remember Xerxes' assistant, the one that was trying to steal the crown from Xerxes? He had formal decrees put into place that he got to be positioned in that particular way. And because of his formal decree, he could tell Malachi that y'all have to stand and bow to me. Look at Book of Daniel. Formal decree. Because remember when that edict, it was the edict that was written. Let's go back to Esther for a moment. The edict that was written meant that Malachi had to bow, and when he chose not to bow because he did not want to bow to whatever Haman's god, that's when Haman wanted Malachi's head. So he went through all that process in order to try to have Malachi put in jail. Let's go to Daniel. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den because the friends turned around. And remember, Daniel and Xerxes, in both situations, it was people that were associated with them. They brought to them information, and they twisted it ever so slightly to get them to create decrees or doctrines, legal documents, in order to have these people thrown in prison, in jail, to keep them there. And that's what the enemy does. He wants to either put you in a homeless shelter, he wants to put you in a crazy house, or he wants to put you in jail, because he wants to stop your ability to progress and or move forward. But they will create legal edicts, and you're seeing it right now, with coming against Christians, coming up against the birth of babies, all of these types of things. Certain types of rules that give sin authority over Christianity. All you got to do is put a particular grouping of people ahead of it, and nobody can talk about it, not even the Christian, and then they have to take it to federal court. That just recently happened to a group of people that refused to wed a particular people group. And that people group felt discriminated against, and they wanted to take that company to federal court and all of this to try to bring them into legalities, stop their business, stop their progression, the Christian company. Why am I saying this? This is for such a time as this. I've been seeing 414. The Lord showed me when I was starting this, just before I came on to start this video, which turned into series, he showed me what's going to happen if they one day say that it's illegal to heterosexual people to sign a marriage certificate. Think about that. You better have your documents in order. Have your documents in order. You want to have licenses and all of these things in order. Because Esther had to go through the formal doctrines. If you go back and watch the movie One Night with the King, where she was in the library and she had to go through all of the legal rules. And remember, Xerxes, when she was in prayer for those 3 days, he had to go to the books, the legal books, to find the particular law that he was looking for in order to raise Malachi as that particular person. All of this is law, right? So how can you figure that you can do something, oh, we're spiritually married, and find that it's going to hold any water when you are the one that's going to be affected after? You don't know when anything's going to happen to your God-ordained spouse. You have no idea. God forbid anything happen. But the devil ain't playing fair. And he will use any legality if he can slip you up. Don't mess up. Know what you need to have. Get your licenses. Get your documents. Get everything in order. Do it the right way. Get engaged. If your husband wants you to marry him and move in with him, guess what? There's Vegas. Then y'all can move in, and then if you get pregnant, guess what? There's a legal document to say y'all was already married anyway. The ceremony can happen. If you 6 months pregnant, if you 18 months after y'all got engaged and you got kids, guess what? It's already done. So this is Taj McCameron for the ministry. Until next time. Bye-bye.